So welcome to ICUJP. Love all of you being here. We've been doing this for 50 Fridays a year since 9/11. If you want to help us keep going for another 1,000 years, we appreciate any contribution you can make. We have a link to how you can help in the announcement that you got. Anyway, moving on to more important things. Let's introduce everybody here to Alec, starting with Jasmine and then Steve.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jasmine Haley, ICUJP board member, Christian Science Metaphysics, Peace Mom, and happy to be here.
All right, Steve and then Maggie.
Steve Rohde, holding up the Sonoma chapter of ICUJP up here. Proud to be chair of this wonderful group. Plus, I'm very active in the Black Jewish Justice Alliance, Bend the Arc, a Jewish partnership for justice, Death Penalty Focus, and Indivisible up here. Welcome.
Maggie and then Bob.
I'm Maggie Hutchinson. I'm a member of the Santa Monica Friends meeting, and I am a retired teacher and 211 operator, a current blood donor.
Bob and then Don.
I'm Bob Zoe. I'm holding up the Santa Monica Couch chapter of ICUJB here. I'm part of the resistance, still working on that, speaking at LMU, and I'm putting on Our Town live reads at Pro Comedy, so people can hear the words of Our Town.
All right, Don and then McGregor.
Yeah, I'm Don up here in Santa Cruz, California, in the NAACP, also ICUJP board member, and volunteer and do work in the Middle East. I'll be coming up on a trip pretty soon. Sorry about last week. I was so sick. I couldn't get out of bed. Anyway, that's me.
All right, McGregor and then Rebecca.
My name is McGregor. I live in Salinas. I am a secular humanist, and I like these humans very much. And I am now working with several organizations, but the main priority is to create a worldwide field of peace and friendship toward the people of Iran to reduce the risk of war. Thank you.
Well, that's great. Rebecca and then Quanta.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Arvizu. I'm a technology attorney, animal welfare and social justice advocate. I volunteer with Code Pink and Jewish Voice for Peace, and I sing with the Agape International Choir.
All right, Quanta and then Michael.
Thank you. I'm Quanta Dawnlight. I was not born with that name. I took it in 1995. I'm originally from Istanbul, Turkey. I am a convert to Baha'i faith back in 1972. And I have been a peace activist since my years in Germany back in 1969. Thank you very much.
All right, Michael.
Hi, Michael Novick. I'm with Anti-Racist Action and work on change links, and I'm an alternate on the House of Reps of UTLA as a retiree. And I'm trying to get back in the habit of coming to these Friday forums regularly, but it's been a struggle. I spent 2 years as the general manager of KPFK. It kind of ate up my life, and I'm still in the process of recovery, let's say, from that. So, but glad to be here this morning.
Glad my union brother UTLA is with us today. I see Richard has joined us.
Hi, I'm with Latino Latina Roundtable out in the Pomona, Claremont area, and Cobb Institute and Claremont United Methodist Church. Nice to be here. Hi, everybody.
Swanky, did you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Swanke Worms. I was also not born in the US. I was born in Germany. I lived for a long time in Pasadena, so I'm still a little bit active there with the Pasadena Attendance Union and Lake Elmwood Church. And I now live in Irvine, and I'm active here with a housing group, with the local sustainability committee, and at Manners Church with the thrift store.
All right. I believe we've gotten everybody else, but Alec, we'll introduce you more fully later. Do you want to introduce yourself briefly now?
Alec Summerfield, organizer with Baltimore's People's Power Assembly, labor attorney for AFE, and I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, and great to be on with ICUJP.
All right. And I am Carol Francis Likens, board member of ICUJP and volunteer with both Justice for Palestine LA and Educators for Justice in Palestine, and the Harriet Tubman Center.
Did you see Anthony joined us?
Who?
Anthony?
No, Anthony just popped up. Hey, Anthony, just in time.
You're on mute. It's those earphones.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, great. I'm Anthony Manousis. I'm on the board of ICUJP. I'm also co-founder of a housing justice nonprofit, Making Housing and Community Happen. I'm Quaker, and I also work with FCNL, the Friends Committee on National Interest.
All right, Dolores, thank you for joining us.
Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry for my camera being off, but I'm Dolores Howard. I live in Paso Robles, it's just San Luis Obispo County, and work with several peace and social justice organizations. Nice to be with you guys.
All right. I believe I've gotten everybody, but more people may join us later. I'm Carol Francis Likens, UTLA, a board member of ICUJP, and I think I already said that. Okay. Oh, that's right. More people joined after I introduced myself. Okay. I'm sorry. Who's doing the reflection today?
I am.
Steve. All right. First of all, just want to know if there are any ICUJP announcements, affiliate reports, anything ICUJP has coming up.
Rebecca, you're on top of a few rallies and events coming up, if I'm got that correct.
Yes. Well, upcoming for ICUJP, we don't have anything scheduled at this point.
Or anything we're co-sponsoring or affiliated with?
Not at this point.
Okay.
No, not right now.
Well, I
have a general report for the BLM rally I attended this week.
Yeah, that's later. Or
yeah.
Elsewhere. I do want to say Saturday is another national day of rallies. Check your local communities. It's a continuing call. The best estimates are we got 3.5 million people out in every state in the Union in over 1,300 demonstrations on April 5th. And the call is to increase those numbers every single day.
Steve, you're going to give us a reflection.
Thank you so much. It was a toss-up for me this morning to choose a reflection. one possibility was the extraordinary court opinion by Judge Wilkinson, a Reagan appointee in the Fourth Circuit, who refused the Trump request to stay the orders that Kilmar Abrego Garcia, that the government facilitate his return. It's an extraordinary opinion. It's short, it's readable. You can track it down. And it speaks to the abuse of this government toward its people and anyone in this country. So please look for that. In lieu of that, I'm in the midst of writing a piece because I realized that the way that Trump is treating many of us, if not all of us, includes his treatment of lawyers. And many of you know that for almost 50 years, I practiced civil rights and civil liberties law. But in doing my research on how he's treating lawyers and how many of them are now complicit in his destruction of the rule of law, I realized that one of the strongest parallels is the Nazi treatment of lawyers in the Third Reich. So far, 9 of America's largest and most powerful law firms have surrendered to Trump and his illegal threats. These powerful law firms have agreed to provide $940 million, almost $1 billion in free legal services to causes chosen by Trump and the firms, and they've agreed to discontinue their efforts at enhancing diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. The piece I'm writing details this total abdication by those law firms, but there are glimmers of hope in how other law firms are refusing to bend a knee to Trump, fighting back and winning injunctions from the courts because Trump's executive orders in this respect and in most respects are entirely illegal and unconstitutional. In tandem with that, Trump is threatening and intimidating judges, universities, museums, nonprofit organizations, news organizations, television networks, opposition leaders, protesters, whistleblowers, immigrants, workers, and the American people. And we know that attempts to dismantle free societies and impose authoritarianism by attacking the rule of law and the lawyers who are sworn to uphold it has occurred in many countries at many times. But the most ominous parallel is how Adolf Hitler successfully bent the German legal system to his will, and how complicit German lawyers and judges were in that. Trump, like Hitler, is threatened by lawyers and the independent legal system they support. Lawyers are a serious obstacle to Trump's lawless scheme to dominate the entire government and control the American people. He's now facing over 150 lawsuits challenging virtually every executive order he's issued, resulting in over 75 injunctions that have been issued against him and his administration. As we said a moment ago, while millions of Trump's opponents are marching in the streets, lawyers have been among the first responders invoking the rule of law and the Constitution to block much of what Trump is doing. To remove those obstacles, Trump is trying to emasculate lawyers and coerce them into serving his ends. For Hitler to achieve Lebensraum, expansionism, and Volksgeist nationalism, and for Trump to make America great again, it has been imperative to force lawyers to succumb to their will and to transform the legal system into a loyal and compliant arm of the state. Trump has yet to dismantle the American legal system the way Hitler dismantled the German legal system, but he sure is trying. Remembering what Hitler did to the rule of law in Germany is very important as a step to preventing Trump from doing it again in this country. That's what cautionary tales are all about. I do want to lift up law firms who are fighting back. There is a prominent firm, Perkins Coie, that retained another important firm, Williams and Connerly, where I'm proud to say my nephew is a law partner. They went in and got a federal injunction. The firm of Jenner and Block got an injunction from a federal judge. The famous firm of Wilmer Hale is refusing to bow down and got Paul Clement, a prominent conservative lawyer, to represent them. They swept into court and obtained an injunction. And most recently, the firm of Sussman Godfrey, their sin was representing Dominion, the manufacturer of voting machines that lawyers allied with Trump falsely attacked when he lost the 2020 election. That firm went on to secure a $787 million settlement in a defamation case against Fox News. These lawyers are fighting back. Hitler never believed in the rule of law, and neither does Trump. After all, Hitler was convicted of an attempted coup in the infamous Munich beer hall putsch, and Trump was convicted of 34 felonies for his part in a criminal conspiracy to undermine the integrity of the 2016 presidential election. They both considered the law something to evade or break until, having seized power, they could contort it into a weapon to expand their power, silence their opposition, and protect and reward their allies. I'm going to continue to speak out and write about that shocking comparison. People throw around allusions to Hitler. This one applies fully, but it is a cautionary tale. We all have to speak up. We have to be in the streets. We have to provide the power of we, the people, alongside brilliant lawyers and courageous judges who are doing their job to try to save our democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Excellent. All right, we are now moving into that part of our forum that is our main part, and that is to hear from Alec. Alec is somebody I heard speaking at the Harriet Tubman Center, and I was blown away by the fact that he gave us a history of fascism in the United States. It's nothing new. It's not the first time it's raised its head in this country. Alec is a Jewish anti-Zionist organizer with People's Power Assembly in Baltimore, and he's a staff attorney for the American Federation of Government Employees. And he also is a shop steward in the Office of Professional Employees International Union. So take it away, Alec.
Yeah, thank you, Carol Francis. Before I start, I want to shout out my dear friends at the Harriet Tubman Solidarity Center. That's how I met Carol Francis. I was in town, doing some work with John and Maggie around the state's total failure to deal with the Altadena fires, and the escalating ICE raids, and we decided to give this talk I'm about to give, and I met Carol Francis, and she asked me to come join ICUJP, and I'm super happy to be here. I am Jewish. I'm a person of faith myself, so it's good to be in an interfaith community, and it's really great to be here. So you know, I'm going to talk for a little bit, but I love for this to be a conversation. Rick sort of implied that that's not going to be a problem with this group, which I think is great. Um, so I wrote this article that sort of led me to make this presentation back just a few days after Trump was inaugurated. Well, Trump and Musk really were inaugurated in a sickening display in DC and at the Capital One Arena that really invoked, and what Steve said is true. The Hitler thing is brought up too much, but their display at Capital One Arena really was reminiscent of Nuremberg, of the Nuremberg rallies. It really was that sort of fascist concentration power and rallying cry. So I wrote this article and we published it in Struggle to Lucha on January 26th, and then I gave this talk a few days after that, and at that time things were really escalating. Things were getting pretty bad pretty quickly, and things have gotten a whole lot worse in terms of the attacks on unions, the attacks on immigrants, the attacks on any sort of progressive activist. I mean, they're just snatching people off the street and shipping them to God knows where. All of this has gotten way worse. And what inspired me to write this was simply the heil that Elon Musk did when they were inaugurated. They hadn't even really got to work yet. So before I dig into Elon and the Musk family and sort of, their role as like a ruling class, like a wealthy fascist family, I want to talk a little bit about history and some context of what roles wealthy, fascist billionaires and investment bankers and industrialists in the U.S. and around the world have played in this country and, like I said, around the world. So, just some examples of sort of the mold that I think Elon Musk fits into roughly. Henry Ford obviously comes to mind. Auto manufacturer that is a massive supporter of Adolf Hitler financially in terms of technology and providing, frames for vehicles that eventually became Tiger tanks. I mean, providing all sorts of equipment and investment that Hitler's government needed to, make their war machine. Henry Ford himself was an open right winger, openly anti-Semitic, openly hateful towards progressive organizations. Anything, attacks on communists, socialists, all sorts of different working and oppressed people's movements. And Musk, really sort of channels that. Another example from that era, that sort of mid 20th century era, is Prescott Bush. And I think, the media has done a really great job of sort of hiding the history of the Bush family. They always get sort of portrayed as these compassionate conservatives, that they're reasonable moderates. But in reality, Prescott Bush was a fascist sympathizer, investment banker from Connecticut, who invested heavily, heavily, heavily in the German steel companies that propped up Hitler and that were really the backbone of his support among the wealthy German population. Is really how he came to power. There's a lot of mythology that people like Hitler come to power in some sort of popular working class movement, but it's not true. Just like Trump and Musk now, Hitler found his strongest allies among the very wealthy and then sort of the small business community or people aspiring to be in that community. It was business that is always behind fascism. For every connection from Hitler to Steele to Henry Ford, it's Trump to Musk to the Adelsons to the Koch brothers. These are all hard right-wing people. These are and they have been. These are all people who have spent their lives doing everything they can to suck every penny out of working class people. And actually, interesting, the Koch brothers, while they're a modern right-wing billionaire too, their ancestors were heavily invested in Nazi oil. So I say all this to say that there is a long history of the wealthiest people in this country being wrapped up in fascism here and around the world. Another example, JP Morgan, the institution, not the person at the time, led by Thomas Lamont right before World War II, was heavily invested in Mussolini and his government and in their infrastructure and their military infrastructure and all this stuff. So there's always been a strong connection. It's not sort of anything, a strong connection between, capital and the wealthy and billionaires and these fascist demagogues. That they really are one in a way. Because, Trump, the same way Hitler was, is just a representative of these hardline, right-wing, wealthy, uber wealthy people. And so in modern day, it's not Henry Ford, it's not Prescott Bush, it is the Koch brothers. But where Trump and his other fascists have sort of found their real niche are with sort of new tech, a lot of new tech. So Google was at his inauguration, Bezos was at his inauguration, Musk is heavily tied up in Silicon Valley. And then you've got some more traditional, wealthy families like the Walton family, the Walmart, royalty. They're huge Trump people. They're one of his biggest supporters. And they've always been hardline, anti-union, racist, right-wing corporation. And then another example, is the McMahons. Linda McMahon, who's now the Secretary of Education. Her husband was Vince McMahon, the terrible, terrible capitalist pig. There's no other way to describe him, that founded WWE and has faced all sorts of lawsuits and investigations and sanctions for his terrible, horrific treatment of the performers and wrestlers that worked for WWE. And so, that's a bit of a smaller level of capitalists, but they're all tangled up together. I mean, they're all so thick. And, sometimes there's an attempt, and actually it's lessened. In 2016, there was more of an attempt by some of these big corporations to separate themselves a little bit from Trump. And you still see that to an extent with like Apple. But a lot of the wealthiest parts of this economy and the wealthiest people of this economy have lined up behind him because that's what they historically do when they're in crisis. Between the war in Ukraine and the current struggle in the Middle East and the aggression against places like Yemen and Palestine and Lebanon, they feel like they need to drop the hammer, and they don't want to leave money on any table. So that means launching massive attacks against working people across the world and here. And there's a long history of that, going back to Ford and Bush and the Koch brothers and JP Morgan, who were all wrapped up in European fascism. So that's one component of it historically. The other component of it historically that I mentioned briefly was sort of how they get their mass. How they get the January 6th masses, essentially, the thousands of people that they can use as sort of a fascist vanguard to run the country with fear. And this isn't new for them to use fascists in this way, fascist masses in this way either. So a couple examples of that I have. One that comes to mind, and it's a little different than January 6th, but it's still the use of large groups of fascist-minded people to implement your agenda. And the main example that came to my mind was Operation Paperclip, which was sort of the child of the New Deal Democrats and FDR of that era, and then Truman, and literally thousands of Nazi scientists and researchers and bureaucrats and professors, like these are Nazi party members, prominent people, were shuttled out of Germany and other parts of Eastern Europe before the end of World War II and whisked away to the US to help the US in developing nuclear weapons and other strategies to fight the Soviet Union. And the space race and things like that, including Werner von Braun is the most prominent one, but there were many others. And these people who, were war criminals in my estimation, and hardline Nazis, never faced any sort of justice. They got to live out nice, cushy suburban lives while doing very valuable work for the CIA and the U.S. intelligence community and, U.S. nuclear arms development. None of that happens without this large group. I mean, these were thousands of people, and because all their families came, and I mean, there were even political people who came. This was a massive operation. And when you have that, I mean, and you inject that into a society, and people are working at all different levels, that has an influence, that has an impact. And it's those sort of people and the descendants of those sort of people who ideologically anyway, where Musk and Trump find their support. Another example of this is South Africa. And this is sort of where we start to get to Musk. But Musk's family and himself are not the only South Africans to have found a home in the United States after the fall of apartheid. A Baltimore example I want to talk about because it feels so connected is some of you might remember that back when George Floyd was murdered 5 years ago in 2020 and the case went to trial in 2021, the defense of Derek Chauvin called a witness, an expert medical witness, and his name was David Fowler. Excuse me, David Fowler had been the chief medical examiner here in Baltimore City, actually for the entire state of Maryland, but mostly in Baltimore, where most of his work was, for 30 years. And during that time, he had become infamous for rubber stamping Baltimore police and Baltimore prosecution theories of murders, especially in cases where people were murdered by the police. He rubber stamped all sorts of things that were like, oh no, it wasn't the knee to the neck that killed them or the baton to the head or the rough ride. They had an underlying heart condition and that's why they died, stuff like that. And that went on for 30 years in dozens and dozens and dozens of cases. David Fowler was trained as a forensic physician in South Africa at the height of apartheid in the 70s and practiced there through the 80s as a forensic physician doing similar stuff that he would end up doing here. And when Mandela took power in 90 and the ANC took power, he fled. This guy was a mad scientist. He fled and he came here and he became the chief medical examiner in a city that at the time was almost 80% black. He essentially just transferred his little fascist forensic kingdom from South Africa to here. And he was in a position of influence and power. And he got to hold it until the sort of George Floyd reckoning sort of pushed to the issue. Families of several victims who were killed by the police all over the state of Maryland launched lawsuits against Fowler, particularly the family of Anton Black, who was a 16-year-old, he was 19-year-old on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, which is actually the Eastern Shore of Maryland was the home of Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. But he was out there, and with the help of literally some local Klansmen, the police drugged and beat this kid to death. And Fowler said that the kid died from a heart attack or something, and said that the police, that their treatment of him had no connection to his death. I mean, that is sort of insane racist logic. You just can't, and so when he got up there and he testified essentially the same thing with George Floyd, that George Floyd died because he was an addict and he had drugs, it's same just awful racist logic. And these are the people that, the wealthy right wingers in the US and really the wealthy in general, the oligarchs as people are finally calling them, this is what they depend on. People, these hardened fascists from other places sometimes to enforce their will here. And then and one more example is that, and I think we have to be honest, is that both the Trump administration and the Biden administration sent millions of dollars to neo-Nazi militias in eastern Ukraine. They started funding Azov in 2018 and it maintained through both administrations. And unfortunately, the U.S. has a long history of doing that too, of supporting like the Contras, hardline, right-wing, fascist militias or even governments like Pinochet abroad. Pinochet never takes power without the US. This is what they do. So you've got the super uber wealthy fascists, and then you've got sort of their henchmen that they're able to use, the sort of more on the ground level fascists. So with all that, we start to get to Musk. And I think to understand the period we're in the crisis we face, it's really important to understand who our main enemy is. And I think while there are lots of forces lined up behind Donald Trump right now, different wealthy forces, but Musk is sort of the catalyst, and he's like, with his support of Trump has come a stronger era of fascism because he's not just Musk isn't just supporting fascism here. He supports Nigel Farage financially in the UK, and I think the name of their party is the Reform Party, this terrible Nazi party. And he's running around Germany, at Alternative for Deutschland rallies, an openly, essentially neo-Hitler party, saying that Germany needs to stop being ashamed of its past, of the Holocaust. Musk is he's the guy right now. I think he's the real sort of financial and political mind pushing a lot of this stuff. And I'm going to talk to a little bit later, and I think that comes in with the federal workforce. And the attacks on the federal workforce, I think, that is directly a child of Elon Musk. This whole assault across the federal workforce. So given the role this guy is playing, and he's the wealthiest person in the world, I think we have to understand his history. And so let's actually dig into that. The thing that really struck me when I was reading about Musk, and a lot of this is actually on Wikipedia. I mean, it's all confirmed in other sources, but it's like not a secret, is that he has Nazism and fascism coming down from both sides of his family. He's got that ideology going back on both sides, his mother's side and his father's side, for a long time. So it's deeply, deeply entrenched in him. This is what his family does. So his dad was a wealthy engineer in South Africa, came from an engineering family. With the money he made being an engineer, he began to invest in different things like emerald mines and different gems. He was an abuser. He was a drunk. He was a terrible father. But he was also a bit of a right-wing politician. He was a member of the all-white South African Parliament, and he was sort of an up-and-coming star at the time in the late 70s, early 80s, and in South Africa. He was young. He was charismatic. He was becoming very wealthy, and yeah, he was like a fascist rock star in South Africa. So that is where enters Elon's mom, May Musk. And this is where things get really interesting, at least for me. So May Musk herself comes from a sort of fascist royalty family in South Africa. Even though her family didn't actually go to South Africa until like the 50s, they very quickly became sort of prominent, wealthy right wingers in South Africa because they were physicians. So his mom's parents were these two doctors living in Canada. They were Canadian, and their names were Win Fletcher and Joshua Haldeman. And Haldeman especially, but they were both like openly Nazis, and they were both in the 30s and 40s in Canada, openly involved in like the German former Nazism party in Canada. They were like openly fascist, and they were living the high life. They were wealthy physicians. They were involved politically. They run for office, and they were living large in Canada. However, World War II happens, because of the sacrifice of Canadian soldiers, particularly on D-Day. Hitler's variety of Nazism is not super popular. Even though Canada is doing sort of the same thing with doing their own Operation Paperclip, more with Nazis from sort of what became the Soviet bloc countries. But even with that, they don't want like They don't want openly pro-Hitler people out, running around. And so Haldeman and his wife become socially isolated. Their practice suffers. They lose friends. There's not much for them there. And so in 1951, Haldeman says, he says to his wife and kids, honey, kids, we're going somewhere where we can be appreciated for our white purity, and our politics will be loved, and we don't have to be ashamed for who we are, right? So we're going to go to apartheid South Africa. And that's exactly what they did. And they get there in the 50s, and it's a match made in heaven. They become successful again. They get involved in politics again, and they have a daughter, May. May, who becomes a model, but also has been sort of a right-wing mouthpiece her entire life. She's a big proponent of displacement theory, the idea that Jews are manipulating the economy to replace good white workers with immigrants. She openly tweets about that stuff like all the time. She's a total xenophobe racist and has been her entire life. So she meets, in the 80s, she meets this guy, Errol Musk, Elon's dad, and again, it's a match made in heaven. And they get married, and they have kids, and they become tremendously wealthy through Errol's investment in gemstones, in precious gems. So this is where I want to show the video that Rick referenced earlier. So it's just about a 5-6 minute clip. It's the second half of this of a video, and what it is it's Errol Musk being interviewed by a prominent sort of right-wing podcaster, DJ Vlad, and he's talking about how he became wealthy, how Elon became wealthy, and sort of what the climate was in South Africa. And before I show this, people should know it is not pleasant to listen to this guy talk, okay? I mean, it makes my skin crawl, but I think it's really important context to understand who we're dealing with. Because, I think if you listen, you hear the way he says things like, oh, the sanctions were so hard on decent white people. And I mean, he says things that are really skin crawling. This guy is not just he's not just a simple Republican or something, or even a simple bigot. This guy is a developed fascist, and I think it really comes off. So I'm gonna share that.
And the Prime Minister and the head of the Brotherhood of Afrikaners and all sorts of things. But CBS interviewed me in my home in 1976, and they asked me the same question: do you think that South Africa will continue? And I said, the way I see it, we will continue like this at least for 25 years, which would have put us at about the year 2000. I remember saying that to them, and they were critical of my observation. Of course, they were right. I was not right. And then I also said, we have gold until another 25 years. I was really not that old myself. I was still a youth, you might say. So I wasn't really too knowledgeable. But anyway, the thing is, it all really came down much sooner than that. And but as the 80s progressed, in 1985, the president, he became the president. They changed the name from prime minister to president. I knew him quite well, the president, P.W. Botha, and he made a speech in which he said that South Africa will never have a black government, ever. And this was in response to much pleading from the international community. And the result of that was massive sanctions against South Africa. And so from 1985 onwards, the situation in South Africa became extremely difficult for people like me who were doing property development. So any form of speculation in South Africa started to just fall to pieces. People who had previously worked in jobs where, was based on future earnings and all that sort of stuff, were just leaving the country. They just had to. There was no future. There was no hope. In my own case, my work came to a dead stop. White people started moving to trailer parks. Proper white, decent white people to go and live in tents in trailer parks because they just couldn't survive. They couldn't live in their homes anymore. They had to rent their homes out and so on. And I remember in my case, I had a very large propeller-driven plane, twin-engine plane called a Cessna Golden Eagle. And I decided I'll try and sell it. I couldn't sell it in South Africa, so I set off to sell it in England because I was told if I can get it there, if it has full de-icing, they'll buy it. And I set off, and halfway there, I landed at Lake Tanganyika, and I met a Panamanian company that was building roads for the Zambian government, or an airfield and roads. I landed on that airfield on the lake itself, and they saw the airplane. They said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to sell it." They said they'll buy it from me and at the same price, and I was amazed. And I said, "Okay, well, great." And they paid me the same price. And then the next day or so, they said to me, if I would like to give them half the money back, they'll introduce me to, they'll help me with a supply of gemstones, in this case emeralds. And with those, I was able to get into that business, and I managed to turn it into an income-producing business, for the next 5 years.
Because so I guess that you would co-owned or own shares in 3 Zambian emerald mines?
Well, look, they had a mine, and the arrangement was that they started off by giving me about 118 cut emeralds. These are the best emeralds in the world. They are the Zambian emeralds, the best color you can get. Sorry, I'm just doing some sales here. Sales. No, they're the best emeralds you can get. And the Colombian ones are a little yellow, and the other places are a little this and a little that, but the Zambian ones are a deep green. And the arrangement was they would provide me with rough on a regular basis after that, as and when they. Well, nothing firm. It's all a handshake, and that's how it was in Africa, really. And paperwork didn't mean much, and I became very friendly. I'm still very friendly with him. The main man unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, but I'm still friendly with his wife. She's in her 80s now, and so they sent me rough on off and on, and then I would I employed a cutter in Johannesburg at the diamond. We cut a lot of diamonds in Johannesburg in the main street, so I went to see a cutter there, and I started employing him to cut the stones for me and start selling them on my own like that, And so I did this for quite a long time. And I was able to really, I suppose, make 4 times as much as I would have by just selling the plane,
Well, this is where the story gets a little fuzzy, because Elon said that you never owned any emerald mines.
Well, yeah, that sort of story came out somehow because people were saying he didn't make himself, he didn't get success on his own in America. He had this big start, and that's not true. So the start, what we got out of the emeralds, I was a wholesaler. Now I would sell it 7 times what it cost. Let's say what the base cost would be of the ore. So my markup was quite small. But it suited me because I would sell to the upper end jewelers. The upper end jewelers would sell it anything from 20 to 25 times what they paid me. You follow? So, I took a stone that I sold to Tiffany's in New York. There were 2 I sold to them. Elon and Kimball, as I recall, took the stones there first. But anyway, I sold one for $800 to Tiffany's. They said the other one was $1,200. They said we should come back and see them mounted. A few days later, I went back and they showed me the $800 stone mounted. And it was in the cabinet for sale. And I've often asked, the average person doesn't quite get it, but jewelers will give you the right answer. I said, how much do you think they wanted for it? Well, they wanted $21,500 for it. $21,500. So that's different. My income from the emeralds was sustained us. It just sustained us through difficult times. And it wasn't like we were high-end jewelers or anything like that. It's like anybody who has a diamond claim somewhere, that doesn't mean they're just finding diamonds every day.
So, few things here. The way he tries to minimize their fortune off what are blood diamonds is really incredible. They made ludicrous amounts of money. And what he's saying, just because some high-end jewelers in New York made tons and tons more, doesn't mean that he wasn't making buckets of money. He was. And to say that Elon made it on his own in the US is so ridiculous, so beyond anything based in reason. There are literally pictures of this kid in like a suit and tie on their compound outside of Johannesburg when he was like 9. And it's real weird. His face looks the same. It's just like on a kid's body. It's strange. But but the thing is, he has always been steeped in this. And the emeralds, the stones that Errol was buying and turning for a profit were dug on the backs of thousands of African miners across the southern part of the continent in the most horrific conditions that anyone can imagine. And this smug piece of crap has the nerve to get in front of a camera and say, "Oh, we just barely made it with my plundering of the precious gemstones of the African continent." I mean, it's really unbelievable. The nerve of this guy. And also, just for the record, this guy was severely abusive to his wife and children. And here he is, lecturing Elon about it. It's like you're nuts. But I really think we see the colonial arrogance of Errol and of May and of their parents reflected in Elon. There is with Elon, it's more than just your typical, hate or bigotry. It is the real belief that if you are black, brown, an immigrant, LGBTQ, Jewish, Muslim, you are inherently and fundamentally inferior. And that because of that, it is okay to exploit you to the nth degree. And anybody who tries to organize you against us, progressives, labor unions, whoever, they have to be crushed. They have to be crushed because we cannot allow you to come together and for the inferiors to resist us. You're meant to bleed and die and get our gems and get our stuff so we can make our ridiculous, crappy cars and sell them to rich people. That's why, I mean, these people, there is such a colonial arrogance at the heart of the entire Musk family and the way this is all set up. And I think, and I show that video, even though, frankly, for me, it's kind of hard to listen to him talk. I mean, he talks about P.W. Buddha, his old friend P.W. Buddha. P.W. Buddha was a maniac. I mean, P.W. Buddha was so brutal, such a fascist, just violent demagogue that it really triggered the social unrest that led to the liberation of South Africa. Because that sort of colonial repression always breeds resistance. And he's talking about him, his old butt, P.W. Buddha, and the way he talks about, oh, poor white people. I mean, it really reflects when Musk and Trump talk about how DEI is racist towards white people. It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. And the idea that, oh my God, how could white people live in trailers? Like we're the master race. We don't live in trailers. The Africans live in trailers. We're the whatever. I mean, this is really their mindset. And the reason it's their mindset isn't just because they're hateful people, but because that ideology leads to hyper profit for them. Exploitation means hyper profit. And what fascists are aimed at is hyper exploitation of working people. Treat people as poorly as possible, pay them as little as possible, make as much as you can, and then violently enforce that regime across society through racism, Islamophobia, xenophobia, all these different things. So, just a couple of things left here. Thanks for, listening and yeah, just thanks for listening. Just a few more things. So, when I first did this presentation, the salute Elon did was pretty fresh. And just a few days later, like I mentioned before, he went in front of a huge AfD rally in Germany and said that Germany needs to stop feeling guilty about the Holocaust. And really, that was just the beginning. After that came the pardon of all the January 6th fascists, who just all got, and those were like they were prolific fascist organizers and leaders in their right-wing crazy movement, and now they're all back in the streets. Um, and and this is where I sort of want to talk about the federal workforce aspect a little bit, and more from a personal sort of view, because I'm deeply in it right now because of my job, and also because I represent people in our staff union at AFGE. When I first did this presentation, the only things that had sort of started in terms of attacks on the federal workforce were some layoffs, nothing like what's happening now, some layoffs, the deferred resignation program, bringing back in Schedule F, so making it easier to fire people. That's one other thing. The what did you do last week? Every worker has to tell Doge, 5 things they accomplished last week. Since then, things have really, really, really escalated. There is an attempt to completely break what's left of organized labor in this country, and it's working. Since I first gave this presentation, Donald Trump issued an executive order, exempting VA, so Department of Veterans Affairs, Department of Justice, Department of Defense, and EPA and many other agencies from the collective bargaining rights in the Federal Labor Management Relations Statute. And he did that on the basis of national security. It's not about national security at all. It's total crap. It's just an attempt to break labor, which is another fascist hallmark. It's the first thing Hitler and Mussolini did. It's also the first thing Pinochet did. You break the unions. You break the workers' ability to coordinate and organize against you. You break it. You break them at any cost. So with this exemption from collective bargaining, it essentially, it means a lot of things. But the most significant is it means no more payroll dues deduction. Meaning essentially now that AFGE is not getting any money into its coffers, or at least a limited amount. The only people, employees who get to keep their union within these agencies are police officers, which I think is really telling. But they mentioned in their sort of guidance following up this executive order that this was really about all the grievances that in particular AFGE, and particularly in the VA, which is where I work for the VA Council, had filed to resist his different policies, whether it's Doge implementing silent monitoring tools in people's computers to monitor employee behavior, which is literally a thing they're doing in the VA right now. Whether it was the 5 things you did last week. We also grieved the deferred resignation program. We fought back against all these attacks. And AFG has filed a bunch of lawsuits on all these things. And Trump and Musk want to break that. They want to totally remake the federal sector, and the idea being to flood the market with experienced labor and tank wages even more. Between this and now all the tariffs, that also wasn't happening as much when I first gave this presentation. So it's all sort of working together, but the layoffs are really devastating. And what's happening now is that it's cascading. So essentially, not just is the federal government laying off all these people and breaking the organized labor force, but because they're cutting grants and they're cutting programs and they're attacking unions, any nonprofits or contractors or unions, like where I work, wrapped up in that, are now themselves laying people off. And it's unfortunately all very cynical. AFGE is set to lay off 2/3 of its workforce. And I'm in the process right now, being a shop steward OPIU of trying to make sure our people get their rights under the contract as they get laid off by AFGE, who is having to do layoffs because Elon, and this really is Elon's layoff, Elon is insisting upon this breaking of organized federal labor, and it's something they've always wanted, but they're finally, they're getting it now. And
Alec, define AFGE and all these things for everybody.
So AFGE is the American Federation of Government Employees. largest federal sector union in the country, represent 600,000 people. We did represent 600,000 people and had 300,000 members. The impact of Trump's executive order has been to take almost 200,000 members off of AFGE's deduction rolls. That is nothing less than devastating. These lawsuits cost money. Representation costs money. Media strategies cost money. All these things, holding rallies and press events cost money. This is meant to choke the life out of us. And so it's this weird double thing where now, the union is having to essentially engage in really crappy management tactics because of the pressure being applied by Musk and Trump. And I think really this is existential. I really do. The entire labor movement is going to have to figure out how to do this without a net. I think me in the labor movement, we got a little too accustomed to them allowing our existence. And I think like the same way people got to be in the streets around Trump, I think the labor movement has to get back to its roots, which is not begging, but demanding strong conditions, demanding to be treated like people, demanding pay and health care and security in our jobs, and doing it through the picket, through the strike, through old school organizing, because they're not going to allow us to sit in cozy offices anymore and be somewhat incorporated into society. For me, I really think this is an attempt to totally push organized labor out of mainstream society, to totally eliminate it. And when they get done with the federal sector, they're coming national right to work next. They really are. And with this bill allowing them to get around the filibuster, it's going to be a lot easier. And yeah, so I really think this is existential for labor, and it is part and parcel with this whole fascist strategy and history with Musk. This is what they do. This is what they did in South Africa. This is what they did in Germany. This is what they did in Italy. This is what they did in Chile. You break the working class's ability to fight you. You break oppressed people's ability to fight you. It's not a coincidence that some of these people that have been, picked up by ICE and shoved off to Louisiana were labor organizers. It's labor organizers, students, other activists, professors, like Steve mentioned at the beginning. They're trying to eliminate an entire layer of the economy that doesn't work for them. It's one of the only things left. We don't work for them. I actively work against them, and they don't feel like they can allow that anymore. So this is where we are, and I know it's a lot of bleak history. And bleak current events, but the fight is there. It's going to be tough, and we're going to have to overcome some stuff, but people's neighbors are disappearing, and people are losing their jobs at a rate that I think is unexperienced really since the Great Depression. Maybe the only thing that comes close is in the 80s and somewhat after the Great Recession, but this is really devastating. But the fight is there. People are going to get organized. People are going to fight back. We're going to get our people home from these concentration camps we're sending them to. We're going to keep organized labor alive because we don't have a choice. So thanks for letting me get up on my soapbox. Went on a little longer than I intended to, but thanks so much for listening and taking your time. I really, really, really appreciate it.
There's absolutely not a minute you need to apologize for taking. I have one major question, but I'm going to call first on people with their hands up, starting with Steve.
Well, I just want to thank you, Alec, first of all. And I can totally see why Carol Francis tracked you down and invited you here today. This is an extraordinary presentation both in its detail and its historical context, but in your passion and compassion. Luckily, this is being recorded. This will be posted at ICUJP, and we'll share it with you to share with others, because having captured this full talk is important for everyone to hear. Do you have some estimate or a source for us of how many federal employees have either been laid off, fired, or suspended, or lured into that we'll pay you till September deal? Do you have give us some sense of the magnitude of that?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I can generally, it's tough to do exact numbers, but the estimation regarding the deferred resignation, take your money, you be on admin leave, whatever. This recent round has really been effective, and it looks like around 60,000 federal workers are going to take it. So that's big in itself. The layoffs are already in the hundreds of thousands because I think HHS alone laid off 25,000 people. DOD is going to cut 8%. That's 61,000 people, including 5,000 probationaries. The education department is going to lay off 1,000 people. EPA is expected to lay off 65% of their workforce, or 11,000 people. And I'm on the website GovExec, and they have sort of a federal workforce reduction tracker, and it says all these things. And for every agency, it's thousands and thousands and thousands of people. HHS is 20,000. So you put all that together, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of jobs that have already been cut or in the process of being cut. Would you say the name of that website carefully that we could go to? Yeah, it is govexec.com, govexec.com. It's just sort of a lot of different federal workforce news. It's how I keep up with all his crap, because there's a lot of it and they throw it out. They're smart. They throw it out Friday nights, Saturday mornings. I mean, these people are evil anyway. Yeah.
Anthony.
Yeah, Alex, I love what you shared. I just wanted to add a little something about Elon Musk's grandfather, who was part of a party called the Technocrats in Canada. And it's quite interesting because they believed that the world should be ruled by an elite of technocrats. And one of their quirks was they wanted to name themselves with numbers. And when I read that, I thought, so that explains why Trump has named his son X something or other. He is definitely aligned to that ideology of the technocrats. And I wondered if you had, and of course, what the technocrats ultimately want to do is automate the labor force. And that's another aspect of what's going on. Do you want to say anything about that? Did you?
It's a really great point. And I was trying to remember the name of that weird party in Canada they were a part of.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because they're super automation focused. And at the same time, a lot of them are also like pronatalists or whatever, the way Elon and his dad are. And you would think those are in contradiction in a way, because it's like, okay, you want everybody to be like having all these kids because you need more workers, supposedly, but you also want to automate all the work, which I think kind of comes about, which is weird fascist politics kind of contradict themselves. I mean, yeah, I mean, and I think like the fact that they do have roots in technocracy and this idea of having like few skilled people and like, in certain things, it all lends itself towards their attacks on organized labor. It's because they see an opportunity to make tons of money without having to worry about sick leave, healthcare, any of these things with the workforce. So I think it's a point well taken, and I'm glad you brought it up.
Swanji.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you also have a comment about the influence of real estate developers. I heard that Elon Musk is a real estate developer as well.
He was. That's a great point. And actually in the video, he's talking about prospecting and stuff. That's really real estate. The idea of like, do we need to buy this land because it has whatever valuable resource on it? And in South Africa at that time, in general, the real estate industry was so evil. I mean, It was so evil, and he was one of the leaders in it. And it played a huge role in how they got their money. The idea being they buy up farmland, they buy up, from ridiculously low prices from black farmers and turn it into, whatever industrial thing. And Elon still, I mean, a lot of what Tesla does, they buy and sell a lot of real estate. They're still super wrapped up in it. Um, and I think his brother actually, Kimball, who Errol also mentions, is in real estate, I think, to this day. So this whole thing was like wrapped up in it. Their family's wealth was wrapped up in its origin in essentially what was land theft called real estate. I mean, like essentially stole people's land, paid ridiculously low prices, and then sold it or developed it, and then made bucket loads themselves. So yeah, I think it's a great. I mean, they had their fingers in a lot of
They
buckets and
make money.
make money wherever they can.
All right, Michael.
Just to follow up on that, one of the major attacks that is taking place is their effort to privatize the post office, which is both because it's a very, very large and predominantly, I mean, not majority, but it's the largest employer of African Americans in the country. There've been some pretty militant unions. The unions, postal unions, did a wildcat strike against Nixon very successfully. But part of the Wells Fargo Bank put out a investment analysis predicated on monetizing all the real estate holdings of the postal system as they privatize it, and basically acknowledged that it would involve, raising rates on everything. Uh, I did want to say that we haven't talked much beyond the unions. I mean, I think unions are very important. Uh, what the resistance looks like, and I just wanted to raise for people to think about. I went to the hands-off rallies on the 5th, two of them, I think. There was one in Culver City, there was one downtown, and but I was very concerned about really what they organized around. One of the things they said hands off was hands off NATO. And I think that's very, very troubling. And I've been going to a number of different online things. There's a thing I think is called the Rise for Freedom. They're doing these trainings, and all of them just seem very, I don't know, sketchy to me. I mean, I think it was great that there were so many millions of people out for hands off, but I don't think people really examined what the full politics of that was. And I was wondering if you had any response to that, or if we could think about it longer term, because what the fight back looks like, and so on. Just to talk about labor also a little bit more. There was this effort here in California a few years ago, more or less like right to work. It was called the Janus thing, where they basically said that you know, particularly for government employee unions, they could not have a checkoff. And UTLA, which is, Carol France and I are part of, and maybe some other people here, kind of in advance of that, organized its own ranks to essentially become voluntary members of the union as opposed to using a checkoff. And I think that's a struggle within labor to really reorient itself to be more of a social movement that was tied to, UTLA in general, taking up community demands as part of their organizing strategy to deal with privatization and charter schools and so on, was to actually reach out to the families and the parents and get involved in community organizing and take up community demands as labor demands. Uh, that's a lot, but I just think that we really need to think about what the fight back looks like that will overcome the stuff you've been talking about, because uh, people have to have a clear sense of what we're fighting for, and I don't think it's a return to the status quo ante. You know what I mean? I don't think people are really going to fight to go back to uh, the Biden administration.
No. I see we have my hands now. I do want to respond. A lot of points well made. I think it's a really good point made at the end. Obviously things are really bad right now, but I think it's important we don't forget that, um, Joe Biden set the record for deportations in 2024. He broke Trump's 2019 record. Now Trump is almost certainly going to break that now. But Biden broke it last year. Also, Joe Biden conducted a genocide against the people of Palestine, a genocide that's continuing. So like, yeah, for me anyway, the answer isn't, it's not going to that, that can't be it. That's not, I mean, it's just in my own personal frustration, for 4 years, the Democrats got elected, Joe Biden saying most pro-labor president ever. And they barely scratched the surface in terms of pulling back a lot of the stuff Trump did. So it's like, we're just going back to exploitation, just a little lighter exploitation and fire, I think, yeah, we've got to look to other options on how we're going to run this country because it wasn't great in December of 2024. You know what I mean? Like at least in my estimation, people still exploited, still living under racist police terror, still having our money sent all over the world for war, to shoot at other working class people. And yeah, that's not, at least for me, that's not the solution. So,
Rebecca?
Hi, thank you very much. That was really eye-opening. So my question is, Elon Musk recently lost his efforts to in the Wisconsin race for the judge. So he had put a lot of money in it, and it was a lot of rhetoric around it. What do you think would be the repercussion of that? Is he going to retreat for at least for a while, or will that embolden him? We know Hitler had his own setbacks, and so what do you think what we can expect?
that's a great question. I think it's all steam ahead. I really do. Like they're gonna. I mean, Trump faced a setback of losing an election. And then they're all like it's like all the setback, all these people getting arrested. Dragged in front of another impeachment, and they're here. So I think that they'll take their lumps and they'll just say, okay, what's the different part of the front we can attack on? Maybe it's to even escalate stuff against trans people. Well, they'll just shift their whatever. But yeah, I think for them it's all steam ahead. I really do. I don't think we should kid ourselves into thinking there's going to be any mercy or hesitation from them because I just don't think there's going to be.
All right, Quanta.
Wow. This is the most honest, straightforward, candid conversation I have come across in many, many weeks. Thank you so much, Alec. You are the hero. You're my hero, that's for sure. I'll tell you. And I have to disclose something. When I saw you, you look like a you look to me like a rural farmer mega person.
Turns out I'm just a Jewish boy from home.
Challenged my prejudice, thank you. And I appreciate you converting me and not to be so prejudiced myself. I really appreciate that. And I was wondering if you have like a Substack or something, because I want to be your follower. What are you doing? And that's what I wanted to. So give us some anchor so we can kind of follow you. Thank you.
Thank you, Quana. Those are very kind words, and I'm humbled and blushing as you can see. The best. So I write for a publication called Struggle La Lucha under a pen name, Lev Kofax. I just use a pen name because I just prefer. People try to get me fired from my job before, and I just don't really feel like dealing with it. So I use a pen name. Lev is just a Hebrew word that came out of the synagogue I go to, and Kofax is from the pitcher, Sandy Koufax. So yeah, Lev Kovacs for La Lucha. I write for that. I actually just we just published an article I wrote about these deportations that they're saying are to stop anti-Semitism, which I think is just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And I'm angry about it. I like, don't you dare, like, like don't use us to, like, don't you dare, like, use us to justify the tactics of the Holocaust. That's what this is, deportation and concentration. Like, no, I'm not gonna, like, so yeah. So that's probably the best way. A link to the publication, I think, went out in the notice. So just Lev Kovacs there. Actually, I'll put the link in the chat for sure. Yep. And that'll be the easiest way. So thank you for being willing to keep up with me. I appreciate it.
All right, Steve, you had another question?
I did, and Alec, you gave me the perfect transition because I wasn't going to let you leave without talking about your anti-Zionist work, People's Power Assembly, but I'm going to personalize it. I don't. You've said you're a person of faith. Has your sense of Judaism changed over time? Did you always see the light as to the? No, okay, then I'll skip the premise and you can explain it.
Oh, sorry.
And where do you see? And I am a convert to Judaism and active in Bend the Ark and other groups, if not now and not in our name. And I say that because, well, you get the premise. So take a few minutes. We've got until at least 15 after the hour, and there may be other questions. But what's the nature of People's Power Assembly? If I understand, that's the center of some of your anti-Zionist work.
Yep.
And Bend the Ark has hit upon the notion, don't do this in our name. Don't weaponize the fight against anti-Semitism. There is true anti-Semitism, and we see it in Elon's salute and other aspects. So there's real anti-Semitism, and there is criticism of Israel, and Trump has totally weaponized that in his executive orders, and you touched on it, the use, shutting down Harvard and Columbia because they're not fighting anti-Semitism enough. So just give us a few minutes on your take on all that.
Absolutely. I appreciate the question. I was raised in a pretty typical Reform middle class Jewish household. Liberal parents, progressive parents, but not when it came to Israel. I remember in 2006, my father cheering at the TV set as the occupation forces bombed the tar out of Beirut, a beautiful city, an amazing city. And I myself, I was a Zionist till I was 21 years old. Through most of college, I was sort of like a liberal Zionist. But what ended up happening is just it contradicts too much with other values. How can you be serious? At the time when I really, let me take a step back for a second. When I really came around, started to come around was 2014, and the offensive on Gaza by Israel at that time. Because I was at UConn, and most of my friends in college were Muslim. That's just kind of how it gone. And several of my friends had family who were literally in Gaza and West Bank. And I couldn't, I can't look my friends in the face. You know what I mean? And Hillel that summer, UConn Hillel, which is actually, UConn Hillel was covered in this movie called Israelism as an example of how, like, we're all brainwashed. And I got banned from UConn Hillel my senior year because I criticized a flyer, a terrible, terrible flyer for Birthright that said "Wet Hot Israeli Summer" on it, and then like had a bunch of pictures of like, Jewish youth on tanks and stuff. And I'm like, they are butchering children. They are dropping fire on children right now. Like what? What are we doing? This can't be this isn't the Judaism I was taught. I mean, this can't be us. And so from that point is really when I started to change. And, the more I went through life and the more I learned, and I mean, and frankly, the worse this occupation, this genocide got, it became impossible for me not to see my own family history in the Palestinian people. I mean, we hear the stories of, a family died in the Holocaust where like 15, 20 people, whole family line wiped out, their land, or people going back from the camps and their home is a restaurant, stuff like that. That is to the T what is going on right now in Palestine. And for me, it is an obligation of all Jewish people, to stand up and say no to this crap. This is Hitlerite genocide. It really is. And they saw an opportunity after World War II. And this is a part of the history that I think really stuck with me, is learning that, because you're taught that Zionism is inevitable, right? That like, there weren't really people there, and there's kind of this place called Palestine, but then we shut up and everything was good. But when you learn that Theodore Herzl was just a weird racist freak, and that this movement was really kind of small and in a wealthy part of the European Jewish community. And what happened is World War II, obviously it took a huge chunk literally out of the Jewish community in terms of cost of life, but the sort of people who died, especially early in the effort, there were a lot of Jewish left-wing, progressive, and even then anti-Zionist people who did not believe that it was the notion was ridiculous, frankly, that they'd pick up their lives and go to some place it didn't. But a lot of those people were targeted and killed by the Nazis. And so you had in the Jewish community, for the first time really in its history, its progressive base of people had been taken out. And so who filled the void? US and British imperialism. And they substituted their own agenda for Judaism. Is really what I believe. They substituted their own imperial agenda in that part of the world, and they said, okay, this is what it means to be Jewish. And now that's why you hear Donald Trump calling any anti-Zionist Jew a Palestinian, because he's saying if you don't get behind their imperial project, you're not a Jew, which I think is really, excuse my French, fucking ironic, coming from the guy who said there were people on both sides, good people on both sides of Charlottesville. The guy who pardoned a guy who wore a Camp Auschwitz staff shirt to January 6th. Go to hell. Don't lecture me on this. Like you don't get to say anything to me about this. I was in Charlottesville. Like you don't get to talk to me about this at all. And it really shows that like they have no interest for the Jewish people. Musk went to Auschwitz as like an apology, and he was rude and on his phone the entire time, and he dismissed Holocaust survivors. I mean, this guy's a real piece of crap. And I'm supposed to believe that all of this stuff, this support of Israel, of the genocide, and now these deportations are to protect me and to protect Steve? Hell no, they aren't. It's sorry to get so much, it's just total nonsense, and the history bears it out. So I really appreciate the question, because I feel like a lot of us have these journeys, right? And it's always good to talk about, because it really kills their narrative. Their narrative that we all have to, if we don't get behind Israel, we somehow lose our Judaism. Like, tell that to my rabbi. Like, I don't like, it's ridiculous. So yeah, thanks for the question.
Don, and then there's one more question hopefully we'll get to from me before we stop this part. So Don.
Hey, thank you, Alec. That was really good. We got the same hat.
Yeah, nice hat.
I've ever seen with this hat. My wife says I need to wash it, but I'm gonna go help. Tomorrow I'll be down in Santa Cruz. We had last rally, we had 8,000 people. Tomorrow, I don't know what it's going to be, but I did the security for them, which is really fun. for indivisible. That was really cool. You did such talking. My mom's on, she's Micheline, so there's like two. She's the Arab from Egypt, and I'm half Arab, half American. But we have family from Palestine that, lost their home and three businesses just at gunpoint. So that's always been a subject that's been, it's a soft point in my heart. And it always will be. I can't unlearn you can't unlearn the truth. But that's not my question. My question is, what are other world movements that are really alt-right that are kind of in line with what Trump and Musk are doing that, we need to be aware of that other countries and other areas of the world are doing right now?
I think great question. For me, the ones that really stand out are the ones in Europe. And National Rally or whatever in France. I mean, it's still, even though Le Pen is facing some legal action, it's still a massive right-wing fascist movement that's making inroads. So I think I think stuff in France is really concerning in general. The anti-immigrant sentiment growing. Obviously, AfD in Germany is like so concerning. Especially, we're this close from them being in the coalition government. It's like, and they're going to continue to grow. And both those are heavily supported by Musk. Maloney and her neo-Mussolini people in Italy are also, Musk is heavily involved with them, and so is Trump. It's wild, actually. There are two people, Mussolini has two granddaughters who are elected officials in Italy, which I think is just crazy. But and then one that we've already talked about, but also Israel. I mean, that's the thing, is that Israel is a fascist military country, and Musk and Trump are so behind them because of what they had to lose reshipping Israel in that whole region. So I think the European stuff really concerns me, because I worry about escalation with Russia. And I think that even though Trump, and they can see all they want, they don't care about Ukraine, but there's a huge militarization drive in Europe right now, and I find that super concerning and escalatory by NATO. And it's just, what, we all want to die in nuclear fire? I don't. So those are the big, the stuff in Europe, I think, is really concerning to me, because it could become such a flashpoint, and Musk is so heavily invested.
My question is, when maybe 20, 30 years ago, I read Michael Parenti's Black Shirts and Reds and Black Shirts.
Yeah.
Up to that point, I knew of Nazism, meaning you hate Jews. But what the book brought out, and what you're talking about, is the attack on unions and the support of multinational corporations, companies that are making money. I'm wondering if you take 4 different movements that are powerful now, and how do we unite those? And that is the Palestine movement, which after October 7th became the central issue, organizing, and then all of a sudden was dwarfed by all these other things happening. The Palestine Solidarity Movement, the Union Movement, the immigrant support movement, and those people who came out for hands off, the don't take away our Social Security. How do we bring these together into one movement? How do we speak to one group and say, this is why you need to support this other group, besides common enemy?
That's the question, isn't it? And I'm not going to pretend like, because I think we're all grappling with that question. We've got these different social movements coming up, but right now they sort of are acting in parallel to each other, and sort of separate, like, and they haven't really crossed yet. But I think and I think Palestine is really a great vehicle for connecting everybody. Because here's the thing: the people of Palestine have become a symbol internationally of resistance and of hope for a better world and of like fighting back and standing up for yourself and saying we don't have to live and grovel for a pittance. We deserve better. And I think when you take that spirit and you go and you talk to, when I was in LA, we sort of stumbled upon this kind of spontaneous like high school demonstration. There was a bunch of them going on all the time. They were like anti-ICE. And we and John and Megan, we ended up talking to them about, Trump and Musk and the other stuff. And like they understand, like they understand that the attacks on jobs and on workers and on trans people are attacks on them because they themselves represent the intersection. So I think the idea is explaining, listen, just like the people of Palestine, you don't have to sit here and take your Social Security, right? You don't have to sit here and accept these layoffs. You don't have to sit here and accept these deportations. You can take that spirit of resistance against empire. So, we deserve better for ourselves. We deserve better for our families. And if we all fight for each other, we're going to get all these things. And if we fight separately, they're going to break us. They're going to isolate us and they're going to break us. It's what they've always done. And I really think, and the two parts of that I really think need to get connected are the actual progressive elements of people who went to the hands-off stuff for the really right reasons, who are progressive and who don't want to see the social programs cut, understanding that those social programs are being cut so they can spend more money on wars like the one in Palestine. They are stealing directly out of our pocket to fund their wars. And I think if we're able to make those connections around, like, we can reflect the resistance of the people of Palestine they've shown the world, and we can do it because to do it means to stand up to what they're standing up against too as well. Because we're saying we're not going to allow our money to be sent anymore to kill them. We want our money for social programs. I mean, so I think that sort of thing is where we start, but we're all going to have to figure it out as we go through this. We all are. And I don't think any one person has the answer.
Wow. Thank you. And also if they lie, if you know that they're lying about your movement, why would you believe the lies they tell about our movement?
Exactly.
Why don't you find somebody who's telling the truth about your movement and listen to them about what's happening in Palestine? Steve?
Well, as we're beginning to wrap up, Alec, this group knows at this moment that I thank speakers as chair. Alec, you are now a card-carrying member of ICUJP. Your life membership is fully paid up. You are, because of the time change, it's even more reasonable for you to join us on Friday mornings. You are one of the best examples of what we do on these Friday mornings. This is not a quiet, contemplative group. We are an activist group, and we need and applaud work that you are doing every day. We're going to have you back for an expanded discussion on the genocide in the Middle East and other efforts. So we're very grateful to you, and your sense of intersectionality, your crossover with different. You literally are intersectional in your union work and your work in favor of Palestinian rights. So it's a great opportunity for us. Is there a concluding thought you want to leave us with?
Just, hang in there. I know it sounds a little corny, but our solidarity really is what makes us strong. And ultimately, in the long run, they can't beat us if we stick together. They really can't. So just thanks so much for listening. I really, really appreciate it. And I'd love to come back on the meetings and, just as a participant. So thanks so much, really.
Well,
Stay with us if you have a few more minutes.
Of course. Of course.
We're
just want to elevate in everyone's awareness the danger of Nathan Hochman, the new DA of Los Angeles County. We are back in the hands of the DA before Hochman. There was a community phone call with Hochman. The reports are he was aggressive. He was particularly demeaning toward women on the phone call. He is peddling a law and order theme. He's a former Republican who changed his registration to Democratic. We've got a fight on our hands. Other groups are organizing around the DA Accountability Coalition. And I just want everyone to get ready because the prosecution of police officers that was happening under Gascon, Hochman is using the death penalty again. So be alert to that, and we're going to be organizing around it.
One more thing to add to that, Steve. He also, at his swearing in, he had Black activists removed from the swearing in. So it started off bad from the beginning.
Okay, here we are, as Carol Francis said, and back in our traditional circle, and coming as an interfaith people, coming before our God of many names, and doing so with great humility. None of us have all the answers. We've heard a lot about the racism and the tyranny, brutality, the lawlessness of the layoffs and deportations, the genocide that our country supports. And we can feel so helpless. And let's be so grateful that the resistance is growing, that in my own community, the Ice Out of Pomona movement is growing. People are coming together on that. There's just so much that's happening that's hopeful. And my wife and I tomorrow will be out in the streets demonstrating, and Harvard has found backbones. Various prominent law firms are finding their backbone. There is movement. We need not feel helpless. May we each find our place in the resistance and do so with joy, because hate will never win. It's just a matter of time that all that we stand for, love and justice, will win. Question is, how long will it take? I want to just once again thank each of you for being here, for your hearts of caring, your ears of listening. And Alec, thank you so much. It's just your passion for truth and justice is just so clear, and you've reignited, I think, something in each of us this morning. So let us go forth in a prayerful, determined spirit, with steadfast awareness that God is with us. Amen.